morning. Thank you, Bruce, on video. We miss you today. Welcome to the Treasure Coast Unitarian Universalist Society in Stuart, Florida. Today's April 11th, 2021. My name is Judy Clough. I'll be your worship associate today. We're very happy to have Reverend Claudia Jimenez in our pulpit today again. It's lovely. Reverend Claudia serves as Minister of Faith Development at the UU Congregation of Asheville in North Carolina. She was hired in 2018 after graduating from Meadville Lombard Theological School, being granted a preliminary fellowship and becoming a credentialed religious educator. While in seminary, she was a ministerial intern here at TCUUC. Prior to seminary, she served as religious education director at the UU Fellowship of Vero Beach for 17 years. During that time, she ran for office, served on her local school board for 8 years, and spent time in education, having taught elementary and middle school science in the US and abroad. When not at work, she enjoys Latin dancing, cooking, and Friday night Zoom calls with her family. A big thanks to everyone who helped with the service today. Our Zoom host and tech whiz, Corina Pelloni, and our readers for Story for All Ages, Caitlin Parmiri and her son, Thomas Fife. Most of you have heard that Bruce was unable to be with us today, but we expect him to be back next Sunday as long as we're Zooming. We'll mute everyone to avoid any noise in the background. We're welcoming congregation. We welcome people of all gender identities, races, and backgrounds. Thanks for being with us today. We hold Zoom services at 11 a.m. every Sunday. To be put on our email list or to find out more information about us, go to our website at www.tcuuc.org. If you sign up for the newsletter, you'll get an announcement on Friday for the following Sunday and a midweek follow-up from the previous week's sermon. I'll light the chalice. Hopefully. It is there, right behind me. Flame of fire, spark of the universe that warmed our ancestral hearth, agent of life and death, symbol of truth and freedom. We strive to understand ourselves and our earthly home. Leslie Pole Cosbow. Our opening words are also from the back of the hymnal. O spinner, weaver of our lives, your loom is love. May we who are gathered here be empowered by that love to weave new patterns of truth and justice into a web of life that is strong, beautiful, and everlasting. Barbara Wells. Our first song this morning is We Are Building a New Way. It's in our turquoise hymnal, but since most of us don't have one, we're getting a video this morning.
We are building a new way. We are building a new way. We are building a a new way, growing stronger every day. We are building a new way. We are working to be free. We are working to be free. We are working to be free of hate and greed and tyranny. We are working to be free. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our prize. Without these, our world will die. Peace and freedom is our cry.
Let us recite our affirmation, speaking the first verse and singing the second. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
From all that dwell below the skies, let faith and hope and love arise. Let beauty, truth, and good be sung on every land, by every tongue. Amen.
Okay, good morning, everyone. It is so wonderful to be with you and to be jamming along with all the videos. How wonderful to have music in our lives. Our time for all ages this morning will be an interview from the book Oh Freedom by Casey King and Linda Barrett Osborne. The foreword was written by Rosa Parks, who wrote, "I can't think of anything more important to teach young people today than this, that ordinary people working together can change history. They can look for a new Martin Luther King, a Rosa Parks, a Malcolm X to tell them how to make a difference. But they can also look in the mirror." That is the message of this book. And a little bit about the book. In 1989, when Casey King started teaching her fourth graders at St. Anthony's Grade School in Washington, D.C. about the civil rights movement, she realized how little they knew. They had little understanding about how it touched the lives of their families, their friends, and their neighbors. So she invited her students to write a personal history by interviewing family, friends, and neighbors who participated in the civil rights movement. The book, Oh Freedom, contains those interviews. And today you will hear an abridged version of one of those interviews when Matthew Jackson interviews his mom, Ruth. And I'm grateful this morning that Caitlin and Thomas are going to be reading the interview. And I wanted to share with you before they begin a picture of Matthew Jackson and his mom, Ruth. Caitlin, and Thomas.
Okay, sorry, wasn't letting us unmute. Okay, here are Matthew and Mom sitting by the side of the bed, going to talk about equal rights.
Otherwise known as the Civil Rights Movement, and now my mother was involved. Did you take part in any marches or protests?
Yes, I did. When I was young, one of the civil rights groups in Kansas decided we were going to have some sit-ins and stand-ins. We were going to protest at one of the movie theaters where Black people were not allowed.
What grade were you in then?
I was a little older than you. I was in 8th grade.
And were you out protesting?
Yes, and it was a big responsibility for 7th, 8th, and 9th grade kids.
Did they just throw you out there?
No, we had to learn how to protest. We went down on Saturdays to the YWCA, and we did training to be protesters. It was funny. We'd get all dressed up because they made a big deal out of what you wore. We had to look nice. Here's a picture of our church group all dressed up. Many of us trained at the YWCA to picket segregated movie theaters. I'm in the 3rd row, the 3rd from the left. We'd get into separate lines at the Y. One group would be the white people, and we'd be ourselves. We practiced marching, holding signs, and just being quiet. And they would practice getting us upset, pushing us, calling us names, trying to take our signs, spitting on us, all the bad things they expected the white people would do and say.
Was spitting on each other in the meeting and in practice?
Sure, but we knew it was probably going to happen and we wanted to be ready. We were practicing self-control because the idea was that we were just going to be quiet. We were going to stand up there and take it no matter what. And if you weren't able to, if you didn't pass the practice, then you couldn't go.
That does sound good.
It was really scary, Matthew. And even when I think about it now, I choke up inside. And some of us didn't make it. Some of the girls would cry. The boys would want to fight back. And if you showed emotion, you couldn't go because we did not want to incite any kind of conflict.
I think that said inspire.
Incite. It's a typo.
No, because they did
I know, honey, it's okay. We were trying to say we're good enough, as if to be good enough to go into a white theater meant we had to have better self-control than white people who'd be calling us names and spitting on us.
Did anybody hurt you?
Nobody hurt me. Physical hurt wasn't part of it. It was all psychological. I had always heard in history class about America being the great melting pot. I wondered why I had to be defined by my Black heritage alone. People only see us from the outside. I hope that's not always the way it is for you, baby. I hope they see all of who Matthew is. Are you getting tired? I'm getting tired. It's hard to talk about some of these things.
All right, thanks, Mom.
Thank you, Thomas and Caitlin. We appreciated that very much. Brings it more to life when we see people we know. It's now time for joys and sorrows. So let's please share them. I will move a stone in the symbolic river. There's some for each joy and sorrow. Please keep your joys and sorrows brief. Raise your hand to share, and we will unmute you to speak. All right, for those whose joys and sorrows were too personal to share, please know that you are in our hearts and we will move a stone.
Thank you, Judy. And now, as we consider these joys and sorrows that we hold in our hearts, and as we gather virtually and see each other's faces in these little teeny weeny boxes as if by magic, let us take a moment for a musical meditation from the Buddhist tradition in which we breathe in and breathe out, sending love and kindness to all with us and not with us everywhere. So I am going to share my video here, and this is a song written by Yu Sarah Dan Jones and arranged by Francisco Ruiz.
Al respirar, respiro paz. Al exhalar, exhalo amor.
When I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I breathe out love. Breathe when I breathe out, breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe when I breathe in, breathe out, I breathe out love. Breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. Al respirar, respiro paz. Al exhalar, exhalo amor. 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 Al respirar, respiro paz. Al exhalar, exhalo amor.
Right now. The offertory is a standard church practice that we're all accustomed to when we go to service. It's a little bit difficult when we're here in our little houses, all in little boxes on the screen. So let us remember that the church keeps going. We keep getting newsletters and Bob keeps working and lots is still going on. It is now the beginning of the church year. So let us remember to contribute to a fresh start for our year ahead, and hopefully we will be beyond Zooming and back in the church building in not too many months. Thank you.
For the gifts of your time, your talent, and your treasure, we are indeed grateful. So now, as I prepare to share a reflection with you, I am going to invite in a song that was written and shown in 2003 by a group called the Black Eyed Peas. And the title of that song is Where is the Love? I hope you enjoy it. So my friends, where is the love? We've only got one world. We've only got one life. Where is the love? This rap song from 2013 still resonates in 2021 when white nationalism and racial violence are still present in our country. Many of us have been watching the trial of the police officer who killed George Floyd and are hearing, oh, it was his heart, oh, it was his bad choices, oh, it was his behavior as justification. Where is the love? Where is the respect for one another? Today, April 11th, in Southern California, in North Dakota, in Raleigh, North Carolina, and here in Asheville, there are rallies for White Lives Matters, and there will be counter protests. My friends, where is the love? Where is this love that we talk about? We say we live in a Christian nation. Where is the love? This song is a song that I have on my playlist and that I've always wanted to include in a worship service because it reminds me that we have to go beyond talking to action. It reminds me that when we talk about love, we're talking about widening the circle so that we can welcome everyone, so that they, the marginalized, the people that don't look like us, the people that don't think like us, the people that may not have the same education that we have, so that those people become part of us. That indeed is our challenge. And again, we go back to the past. We went back to the song from 2013 that could have been written today. We went back and listened in our time for all ages to a little bit of the stories that happened in the Black community during the time of the civil rights movement. And for some, that is Black history. That is stuff that happened in the past, and we're in a different place now. But we're not in such a different place now. And that is not Black history. That is American history, because Black people's stories are foundational for all aspects of this nation's economic and social history. Yet their stories and their struggles have often been ignored and relegated to being told 1 month of the year. So it is important for us to interrogate and to question history, because it is replete with omissions, embedded assumptions, and misrepresentations of the accomplishments and resilience of the Black community. For example, many of us know the story of Rosa Parks, who was arrested because she refused to give up her seat in Montgomery on December 1, 1955. That is what we know about Parks. And there is so much more to her story. She was a part of a larger community of members of the Black community who were fighting for their rights. She was part of the NAACP, who were also working for civil rights. And when I think about that, I think that that is the part of the story that I find hopeful, because it reminds us that this is not work that one person does alone. And I will come back to that later. But first, I want to invite us to reflect on a few aspects of Rosa Parks' life. So let's go back to her childhood. Rosa Parks became aware of injustice at a very young age. When she was 10 years old, a white boy was bullying her, and she defended herself, and he left her alone. And when she went home that day and told her grandmother what happened, her grandmother scolded her for acting that way around white people. And as you can imagine, Rosa Parks was upset. She felt she had a right to defend herself. But her grandmother, who was born into slavery, remarked that if she wasn't careful, she would be lynched before she was 20 years old. Now, much later, Park writes in her autobiography that it wasn't until she got older that she understood that her grandmother scolded her because she cared for her and knew how dangerous it was to speak out. The KKK was active in her community, as they were in many communities then and now. At a young age, Parks realized Black people were not free. Can you imagine growing up knowing that your worth and dignity are not valued? Although progress has been made, police brutality and educational, economic, and health inequity in our country continue to send this message to our children and the Black community. So we have to keep asking ourselves, where is the love? Where is the love that we talk about for everyone, not just the people that are like us? Now, Rosa, as she grew older, continued to believe in the importance of speaking up. As a young woman, she became active in the NAACP, although she knew that being affiliated with them was dangerous. She was involved in voter registration and criminal justice issues. She investigated and organized support for cases of sexual violence against Black women. And you know, she was not always successful. In fact, she was rarely successful. And at times, those losses were so demoralizing. But she persisted because she knew that that was the right thing to do. I am sure she was wondering, where is the love, people? Where is the love in this democracy where we talk about equality and our laws and our behaviors show us otherwise? And so Rosa just kept working. And one of the things that brought her joy, because there has to be joy in resistance, doesn't there? So one of the things that brought her joy was working with the NAACP Youth Council. It was a small but very active group. And Rosa Parks was energized by the youth's focus and determination to support voting rights and desegregate libraries. This work planted the seed for her lifelong commitment to Black youth and the founding of the Rosa and Raymond Parks Institute years later to develop youth leadership skills and ground youth in a deep understanding of Black history, a history not available through traditional schools or a white-dominated media. Her work with youth is a reminder of the importance of elders, their stories, and their guidance in the lives of young people. Because that's one of the places where we can find that love that we are looking for, in that generative time in our lives as we get older. We have a responsibility to mentor, to nurture our youth. We have wisdom, we have stories, and we have the gift of time that sometimes their parents don't have. So there are places where we can find that love that seems to be lacking in our world today. So all of this stuff was happening before Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on that bus, December 1, 1955. It wasn't planned, and she was not tired, as we have often heard. She wrote in her autobiography, "People always say that I was tired, but that isn't true. I wasn't tired physically. I was not old, although some people have an image of me as being old then. I was 42. No, the only tired I was tired of giving in." Those are her own words. And you know, one of the things that we don't realize is that after she was so courageous and after all the work she did, she lost her job and ended up having to move to Detroit, thinking that maybe in the North it would be better. But she encountered racism there too. And one of the other things that we don't, or that at least I didn't know until I started preparing for this sermon, was that in fact, the boycott that she started was not the boycott that resulted in the court case that ruled against segregation. After that boycott was started, the leaders of the Black community, mostly the male ministers who very intentionally excluded the women, they met and decided to continue the boycott. And during that time, there was a discrimination lawsuit filed on behalf of 4 Black women: Aurelia Broader, Susie McDonald, Claudette Colvin, and Mary Louise Smith. And the outcome of that lawsuit was the Supreme Court ruling that segregation on municipal buses was unconstitutional. And it ended a boycott that lasted 381 days. So there's some of that history that maybe you knew it, but I didn't know this history, and I just thought it was really interesting what stories are told, what names are uplifted, and what names are ignored. But as I mentioned earlier, after she did this, Rosa Parks continued to deal with racism. And yet, she continued for 40 years after that boycott to work for justice. And one of the things that grounded her was her strong Christian faith. And another thing that grounded her were all of the activists with whom she worked. And when I was reading that, I wondered, how does our Unitarian Universalist faith ground us? What are the theological anchors that give us hope in times like these, when we have so much racial injustice in our country, when we approach Earth Day and there's a climate crisis? What is it that gives us hope? And where is that love? It seems like she found that love with fellow activists, with people who supported her, even though the racism and the violence and the brutality were rampant. Park's story invites us to consider our commitment to racial justice. How are we each called to be allies who join in solidarity in speaking out against injustice, or in being accomplices who partner with Black people to work together for justice? This is work that we do together. We tend to be individualists in Unitarian Universalism, but we know that it's not one pet project that's going to make all the difference. It's a whole bunch of projects and a whole bunch of engagement. And how will we know when we have made progress? When we witness an injustice and cry out, how is this happening to us? Not how is this happening to them, to those poor people. How is this happening to us? When injustice done anywhere is perceived as being done to us, that is when we know that we are truly on that path and doing the work. When they become us, when we, regardless of identities, are all working together against the systems that perpetuate injustice and exclusion. That we is such an important part of Rosa's story and all activist stories, because they are embedded in a larger movement fighting injustice. Imani Perry, professor of African American Studies, laments the American approach to history that focuses on solitary heroes as outliers. If they're solitary and they're outliers, they're not the norm, they're the impossible. When in fact, she writes, social change is never wrought by individuals. Movement is a collective endeavor. And the romantic ideal of the hero obscures the truth. Now, this does not diminish Park's courage and her inspiring activism, but it reminds us that her courage was magnified by the hundreds of Black people who chose not to ride the buses in 1955, despite the violence and despite the threats. And the long list of activists who have continued to work for Black equity in America. The activist and movement stories that we have learned are but snapshots of a long and continuing journey. There is much history to revisit, friends, for voices and for stories that have been ignored for too long. And I leave you with this from here, from North Carolina, where last month the Board of Education agreed to include in the K through 12 social studies curriculum standards that will have teachers discuss racism, discrimination, and the perspectives of marginalized groups. And it's about time. But the vote was 7-5. It did pass, but it was 7-5, with some members objecting that these new standards were anti-American. One member said it would teach that our nation is racist, when in fact it is not racist at all. I find that shocking to hear that kind of commentary today. It's shocking. And I wonder what the implementation will be like. All I know is we must continue to speak out and use our privilege to dismantle racism and white supremacy in ourselves and in our communities. It is not easy. There are no simple paths that may be evident for us, yet each of us can contribute to the work. We don't have to tackle every issue, because we are part of larger networks and communities working for a more equitable world in which all can live to their potential. In discerning our role in this work, may we have a faith that grounds us, a community that sustains us, and an understanding of love that includes all. so that it is us that is moving forward. We are moving forward. And may we have the courage and the persistence to remain in the work. May it be so. Now I invite you for a moment of reflection and music. You and I were made for love. My friends, where is the love? Let's go forth and let's love. It's wonderful to be with you today.
Thanks so much, Claudia. Lovely message. So I'll extinguish the chalice. May our ancestral flame, spark of the universe, remain in our hearts as we extinguish the chalice today. And may we remember Claudia's message to us all week. After the postlude, please place yourself into gallery mode and stay with us for our chat time. Thanks.
Postlude is entitled, I'm Gonna Sing When the Spirit Says Sing.
Thank you, Bruce.